Okay, this is really just to give us a chance to play around a little bit with introducing variables and so on, something you haven't done before. So I might as well just kind of demo these first couple of exercises. This one asks us to declare a couple of variables to use for storing a date of birth and a string, right? So to save a bit of time, I'll copy and paste a bit of code here, just so it's not quite so painful watching me type. So again, we use the keyword declare, okay? The @ symbol demarks a variable name, and we have to give one of our standard data types. So date works very well for date of birth, and then varchar just to store the name of the day that this person was born on, right? So next I'll use that keyword set. We want to store a value in our @date of birth, right? One thing I want to point out before I go on is notice right away I'm getting some IntelliSense here when I hit the @ symbol. It looks like, okay, what variables do we have? But it's important to note is what variables do we have in the scope of this batch, right? Variables live and die within a batch. So if you start using Go keywords in your scripts, just be aware that the variables only are visible or can be seen in the scope of one batch, right? They don't live across those delimiters, those Go keywords. So right here though, I have the ability with IntelliSense to pull out my two variables. So I can set the date of birth equal to, and I need a volunteer in the room who's not shy about their date of birth and is willing to tell everyone in the class what day were you born on? Anyone?
2nd September 1995.
Okay, 1995. September was it?
Yeah, September
6th?
2nd.
2nd. My apologies. All right. So there we go. So we have the date of birth. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to use a built-in function to figure out what day of the week that is, and we'll store that in our other variable. So I'll do another set @on born day, or born on day, sorry, my dyslexia again, equals. So there's a few different ways I could do an expression to accomplish that, but we have a built-in function called date name, right? Date name, we pass it the interval, or date part as it's sometimes referred to. So I'm just looking for the day of the week. DW is a nice short form. Okay. Then the date, well, that's simple. It's just my variable. That's what variables are good for. They store values. So I can pass the value currently stored in my DOB. And that's all it takes. So that should calculate the name of that particular date, okay, the day of the week, and store it in my variable. So to get that up on the screen, as we talked about in our PowerPoint, I could quickly do a select @born on day. Now that would work, but it would just not have any unnamed column or something. So I can just use as, right? Give it a bit of an alias. Day of the week you were born. Something like that, right? And if I click execute, drum roll. Yahoo! There we go. Okay. Now we see down here results. So we get a result pane with a usual grid to show a result set, right? Because it was a select command. Okay. The day of the week you were born and the value is stored in my variable, which I'm selecting here, Saturday. So you were born on a Saturday. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Sometimes I've done this before and people say, I never knew that. Okay. Let me just point out here, there's also, of course, our messages. One row affected, right? That came from the fact that we ran a select and it returned a result set with one row in the output. Okay, so we have both here. Now, that's one way to get the data out of a variable, but that's a little awkward, isn't it? Have to come with a column alias just to see below it what the value in the variable was. So I just want to share with you, I'll just comment that one out for the moment. And another way we can get data up on the screen is just with the print command, right? I can say print, print, and it's just a string, right? So I can just build it as any other string. You were born on a, use plus for simple concatenation, at born on day. Right? Okay. So executing the whole script that way, you notice two things I want to point out. There is no little tab here saying results, right? Because we didn't do a select here, so nothing was returned, no data set was returned. We still have the messages pane, and that's where the printed message shows up. You were born on a Saturday. Okay? So sometimes we can be a bit more explanatory or creative wording of feedback, right, in a print command than just with a select. So it depends on the circumstance. The most important thing is just get the data out of the variables and show them in most cases, but you can obviously present it a little bit more professionally looking by using print. Just I want to mention one thing though, a little bit of a danger with this plus. It works for concatenation, but it's pretty stupid, okay? It's not very advanced in terms of its concatenation. Let's say I wanted to just modify, and I also want to show what the actual date was in my outputted printed statement, right? You were born on, okay? Maybe I'd end the string there, concatenate, want to show the date itself. That's part of the feedback. At DOB, concatenate, which is a, right? That would make a nicer sentence. Say you were born on 1995, 01, whatever, right? Which is a Saturday. Trouble is, I'm going to get an error. Sure enough, I did. Okay. The error says data types varchar and date are incompatible with the add operator. Now, I'll be honest with you. If I were to use that more sophisticated concat function, C-O-N-C-A-T, right? And you put brackets, just comma separate things to concatenate together. It's more powerful, and it would actually do the data type conversion for us, avoiding this problem. But you know, without having to resort to that, I can get away with my plus symbols as long as I look after converting this date data type into a string data type of some sort, right? Something compatible enough to be able to just use plus to concatenate. One of my favorite functions for doing that kind of thing is that convert function. Did you use that last term? Okay, it's in our first reference PowerPoint under format and query output. It talks about convert. There's cast as well. I could just cast it as a different data type. I have two choices, but I kind of like convert because it also has an optional style number, so you can change things like year, month, day, and day, month, year, and so on with different style numbers. Again, look it up in that PowerPoint that I gave you as a reference. So I'll just go convert. Okay. The first argument we pass is the data type. Sorry, the data type we're converting to, and I like the fact that I can say something like varchar, and I don't have to say how big, right? Right, and run it. Oh, maybe I didn't leave enough room for the whole date to go in or something, right? No, that's not a problem. It'll just make as big a varchar as I need to hold the value that I'm giving it, right? And that's enough. I can just say it like that. Okay. If I execute this, there we go. Now I actually have a nicely formed sentence. You were born on, okay, which is a Saturday, right? Okay. I should have a space after that comma, but now, of course, there is, as I said, the different style numbers. I'll let you look up and see what the different choices are and what they result in. But you can see right away there that I'm just getting the date in a different format and so on. So give you some power and flexibility over the way you're printing the messages out to the screen. Any questions about that first example? Okay. Well, let's go on to the next one then. I didn't copy and paste the instructions. I'll have to just bring it up here in Blackboard. Okay, this time we're going to pull data from a database, right? We're going to make a select query. I'm using Sport Motors, so I'm in the wrong one. That's okay, I can fix that. That gets a customer ID. Okay, we'll actually get one customer, ID number 4. We want to show the name, including the middle initial concatenated in formal name format. We're going to show the customer's billing address, concatenated all together, address, name, and so on. Right? We'll make a couple variables, one for the name and one for the address. And in our select query, we'll assign, right? We'll assign values using expressions of those two pieces of information into the two variables. And we'll output the name and address results at the end. I'm going to need a couple variables. I'll need a select statement where I assign the values into the variables and then just show the results. Okay? So, let's make sure I switch to sport motors here. If I wanted to, I could just put use D Stovall sport motors go, right? And then now if I execute this code, it'll make sure I'm in that database. By the way, it didn't matter which database I was in for the first one because I never actually did anything with any tables, right? It just, code would run inside any database. It wouldn't matter. It's not really using the database for anything. But this next one is going to be different. So here I go. So I'm in my sport motors for sure. Now I do need some variables. I need one for the name, one for the address, and I'm going to use a variable as well for that customer ID. It's not really 100% required because I'm given that it's going to be the number 4. But you know, if I do want to do this and test it a little bit and change the value and try it with different customers, it makes sense that I might want to make a variable so I can quickly change it in one spot, right? And then manage that quite easily throughout the whole thing. Okay, so use sport motors. I'll create 3 variables, one for the name, one for the address, and one for my customer ID. Now, it's good to use, good practice. Look in the tables. If you're making a variable to hold data coming from a table, well, what kind of data type is used in the table, right? If you look up the customer ID field, you find out it is a big int. So if I'm going to make a variable to store a value coming from that field, it only makes sense. It should be the matching data type. For the address, what I did is I looked at the size of all the different fields I'm going to concatenate together to build this one address string and added a couple extra. So 150 should be big enough to hold any address in the system, right? So you have to do a little bit of thinking when you define these different things. Okay. So that'll give me my variables I need. So what I might do is start off, I'm just setting up for some easy testability if I want to try it with different customer IDs. I'll set my @customer ID. Notice I'm no longer seeing my @DOB or my @born on date, right? They're still here in my script up higher, but there's that keyword go. So I've ended that batch and I started a new batch. That's why I don't see those variables anymore. They're out of scope. They were in the first batch. We're in a new batch altogether. So I can set my customer ID equal to, the instruction said 4, right? So I'll just set it to that. I'm doing it this way so I can easily change the number later on. Okay, and just run my little test script here again and see the results for different values. Over and above the instructions, but can't help myself. It just makes sense to do it this way. All right, so now I need to select, okay, from Sport Customer. So I'm going to use my query design tool, Design Query and Editor, to help me get the basics of the query in place. I've got the wrong tables, university ones. That's because I've never at this point actually executed this command. See, I'm still working in Ironwood up here. So one way to do that is I'll just execute this much on its own. Now I'm in Sport Motors. So when I go into my query design tool, good thing I'm recording this, right? Because I'm going pretty fast, I know. Okay, I can just select my Sport Customer. Now, what is it we need from here? Well, one thing, I need the last name. I want to put it last name and then first name, right? And then a middle initial after that. So I'll grab last name first, then the first name, then the middle initial. I only did it in that order so that they'll be that way arranged in the select command. And I can just easily do my concatenation there, right? Just concatenating between them. Then I'm also going to need my address. So that's going to be the address field, as well as city, the state abbreviation, and the zip code. So those are all things I'm going to need in the output eventually once I concatenate them together and show them. Now, of course, the only thing left is a pretty simple query, really, is I want to filter for one particular customer, right? So I'll check off customer ID, my primary key, just to get it down here in the grid so I can work with it. But if I focus in down here, what I'm going to do with the customer ID is, no, I don't really want it to be part of the output. I'll take that off, right? I'm not going to show it or project it at all. But I'm going to filter by it, right? So coming over to the filter column, I'll just put my variable name at customer ID. Sorry, it's kind of running off the screen because of my zoom factor. Okay, and if you watch carefully down below, as I click off, it added where customer ID equals at customer ID. So we can use variables, absolutely. That's why we have them, right? Okay, that's close enough. That's as good as I'm going to get in terms of help from this tool. So I'll click OK, bring the query down here, right? And I can start working on it. So you can see it set up. I've set my customer ID value. So this execute should work, right? I should be able to actually do this if I execute all that. Query executed successfully, and I can see down in results I'm having output from the select query, right? All the different values and so on. Now I haven't put the actual values into the variables yet. That's going to be the last thing for me to do. So let's just get back here. What I need to do then is I need to do some concatenation. I want to have last name concatenated to first name. So instead of a comma here, I need a plus quote. So I'll have the last name, a comma, space, put that inside the quote, plus the first name, right? So I'll get the first two together. Now I'm going to have an issue with middle initial. Because if you remember, in some databases, you have fields that are sometimes allowed null. And if you look carefully at the create statements that were used here, or quickly bring up the table design, you'll see that middle initial might be null. If I count on it being there and I use it in my concatenation, any field or record where the middle initial is null for that record, the whole expression comes back null, right? Nulls propagate, whether it's mathematically or even in string concatenation. So what I have to do is I have to use a function to handle, what if this is null? Can anyone help me out? Good review question here. What can I do to check and substitute something else if this is null? Very close, okay? There's actually a couple choices. We talked about coalesce, right? And as well as is null, okay? Is null is a simpler one to remember. Is null is a function where we pass the expression. It doesn't have to be a simple field. It could be a full expression. But if it returns null, then the next argument is, okay, what are we going to substitute with, right? So actually, I'm going to write this a little differently, because being an expression, basically after the first name, if there's no middle initial, I want to end right there. If there is a middle initial, then actually I want to put a space, then the middle initial, then a period space, right? Or a period at least. So that would be the whole expression that I'm going to evaluate. Right? And if it's, as long as it's not null, that's what I want added on to the end of the first name. A space, the initial, and a period. Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I want for the middle name. Mind you, if this whole thing returns null, the only reason it would is because the middle initial is null, then I just don't want to return anything, but I have to have something there, so an empty string is the perfect thing, right? So that should take care of it. Now I'm kind of wide on the screen here, so I might, fortunately white space is immaterial, right? So I'm just going to space this out a little bit on multiple lines so we can see what's happening there a little bit better. Now I need an alias. No, I don't. Okay, I'm going to leave out the alias for now. Okay. So the address, same kind of thing. To save a bit of time, let me just grab my concatenation for it. And I can do the same thing. I can space it out here a little bit more, line by line, right? Okay, so at this point, this is still an executable select query. No problem, right? It will execute and it will return a result set. I'll just grab everything from the top of my batch to the bottom, execute, and now I'm seeing the results just concatenated together. No column names. Oh, I forgot aliases, right? Okay, but there's last name, comma, first name. Oh, I messed up in my concatenation there a little bit. I forgot to include this with the other. No problem, easy fix. See, I put a comma here instead of a plus. right? It's supposed to be the last name plus the first name plus this expression that handles, basically returns an empty string if there's no middle initial, right? Or the full thing, space, middle initial period if there is one. Okay, you know what, for now, I'm just going to, I hate having to select, so I'm going to delete all that stuff. Don't worry. Okay, now that looks better. Okay, I'm getting the results I want. So I want this in my first variable and this concatenated address in my second variable, right? Okay, so that's the only thing I have left to do. So I wanted to point out two things. If I did have aliases, I would get an error message trying to do this next step. But what I'm really after is I'm going to use this select statement, pulling this wonderful data from the database, okay, but I want to store those values instead of returning them as columns. I want to put them in variables. These other variables here, my @name, right? So my select can be just @name equals, right? And that will store the first one. Now it's complaining because, hey, you can't mix it. If you're going to return data, that's one thing. If you're going to assign values into variables, that's good. But you can't mix it and do both. So if I'm assigning this one variable, I have to be using this in assignment statement too. No problem. @addy equals, right? So now my select statement basically is going to execute, but we aren't going to even get a result pane down over here because it doesn't return results anymore, because a select can have two possible roles: return results, a result set, or carry out variable assignments. You can't do both. So I won't even see results. I'll just get that run, and that'll be all there is to it. So if I execute now, command completed successfully. Oh, thank you. It worked. Mind you, I don't know what the values were. Okay, so that's where I've got to do a bit more work. Oh, do I have to? Yes, you do. Okay, so I mean, obviously the quick and easy thing is just to do a select, right? Oh, I lost my spot here. So I can just simply do a select @name. And I'm not even going to put aliases right now. I'm just going to get the data up on the screen. @addy. Okay, now when I execute, right? Okay. So I get a single one row affected message, but it's important to note that that is from this select. That's not from the one where we assign the values in. That doesn't return any rows, so there was no one row affected message from the earlier select that's used for variable assignment. And we're seeing our column names here. I don't have any aliases, but I could have done that. Okay, and then I would actually have names above these columns. I'm just being in a hurry. Any questions about that example? So really what we saw here was, okay, a couple things in this example. Again, creating variables. And I can quickly, now that I have it set up this way, if I want to see the values for a different customer, right? All I have to do is change that one thing, run it again, and I see that this is Sandra Askland, right? And her address. Go with somebody else. Now I have Stacy T. Oh, there's one with a middle initial. See how that worked, right? So we actually have the space T period, whereas with the last one, it was just ended at the end of the first name. Yeah?
If you wanted to make alias for the name,
Yeah?
would you just go variable as name?
Exactly. It just right here, I just say as, you know, a nice explanatory to make it clear to the user what it is. Oh, I have a space in that one, so I need square brackets around it. You can use quotes too, but I like square brackets to delimit aliases because it always works. Quotes work if a certain option is set in the database, but it doesn't always work. Square brackets always work. That's why I prefer it. Okay, now I have some names above the columns, right? Now just to show you, just to prove, if I tried to add an alias here, or something, well, that's the wrong one. But you see, you get all this underlining, right? Incorrect syntax near as, and so on. If I tried to execute, I get a incorrect syntax. Okay, it just doesn't let you use an alias if you're using it for a variable assignment. So I was being lazy, but because I knew it wouldn't work anyway. But yeah, you can use alias, or I can use a print, right? And I can put it in a nice paragraph even of feedback to the user in a print command. All right, well, I think that's probably enough of me lecturing. So just to quickly review then, what I'm going to do is I'll leave these examples up with this. I'll post my little solution file. And there's a couple more practice examples that you can do, in addition, of course, to the next actual assignment. Up under the assignments and tests. So as I said, the first part is just creating a transaction. So following the PowerPoint we did on transactions, you should be able to get part 1 done. We'll start on Thursday. We'll talk a bit about stored procedures, and you'll be able to carry on with the rest of the parts of this exercise then. Okay, any other questions?